With the box done, I'm just going to quickly come in here and add in 2 extra edges, just to join these things up and make 2 quads out of this n-gon. Remember, we have to do the same on the other side as well, so throw that in there. Now, because this is an intermediate tutorial, I'm not going to be going through step by step the remaining parts of this model. I'll be giving you a kind of good outline of how we're going to do them, and I'll be showing you the more difficult parts or any interesting parts that we come across along the way. At this point, we've covered all of the tools that we're going to be using to do this and to create the rest of the model, but I just want to go over one more technique again on this box here. And what we're going to do is go to a top view. We're going to add in this shape here. Now, if we zoom in, you can see that there are 2 rings. You've got this center thing, which is a button, and you have this rim around the outside, and this is actually connected to this box. So the technique that I want to cover is basically integrating a circle into the top of this box, and it's going to be something that we'll use in a lot of places on this model, so it's a good thing to learn. So with the box selected, I'm going to basically surround the shape by edges. So you can see at the moment we've got an edge running through it, so I'm going to ignore that guy, but I'm going to use the loop slice tool to add an edge running below it and to the left of it as well. So we basically isolated that section from the rest of the model. Now, if we select these polygons and see how many verts kind of make up their edges, you can see that we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 verts. And this number of verts is basically going to be the same number of edges that you have in this circle. Now 6 is perhaps a little bit too low because we want quite a bit of detail on this little part of the model here. So what I'm going to do is add in some extra edges running across this button. So I'm going to select this edge here and loop slice, and I'm going to add in 3 extra edges. Now with that done, if I select these polygons and hit backspace to get rid of them, and then double click this edge loop, you can see that we have 12 edges. So the circle that we make in here to integrate into this model is also going to have 12 edges as well. So we may as well get onto that. So I'm going to come up to the Basic tab and click on the Cylinder tool. I'm going to click and drag out our cylinder. You want to make sure that the radiuses are both the same, so I'm going to put that to, let's say, 2.8 and 2.8. And remember, our sides needs to be set to 12. Now with that done, you can just move it into position, and when you're happy, hit space to drop the tool. And we need to remember to make sure that it's right at the top of the box before we start integrating it, otherwise we'll get some weird shading errors. So I'm going to chuck it right to the top of the box. Then back in perspective view, it's as simple as double clicking that edge loop, and then double clicking this edge loop as well, and coming to edge, bridge, and right click. And now you have that circle integrated into the top of the box. Now from here it's actually pretty simple to make the rest of the shape. You select the polygon, we're going to bevel it in slightly to create a rim running around the outside, and then going to shift click and bevel it up slightly, go to a front view, and what we can see, actually if I go to a back view, you can see that we can't see an awful lot of the ridge there, so I'm going to keep that nice and small, just up a tiny bit out of the model like that. And I'm going to shift click and bevel it up one more time, go to a top view, shift click, bevel into about there, shift click, down, shift click in, shift click up to create the button. Now if you go to a back view again, we can basically shape the button, take it to the right height. We want it to be about there. I'm going to shift click one last time and drag it up to create that extra edge. And then we need to basically split this n-gon up into either tris or quads, and the easiest way to do that is to bevel one final time, and then without deselecting, come to vertex and join averaged. And when that's done, it says 12 vertices joined, and if I go to subdivision surface mode, you can see the bottom section looks pretty good. We've integrated that nicely, but there are some edges in here that are much too smooth. So just like on every other part of the model, we're going to go in and add some edges to shore these up. So I'm going to select this guy, and I'm going to select this guy, which is running inside of this edge. I'm going to hit loop slice, which is Alt-C, if I get my keyboard combinations right. I'm going to select the count to 2 and the mode to symmetry, right click, and just draw out 2 edges there. I'm going to do the same thing here. So loop slice, drag out some edges, and then the same thing here as well. Drag out some edges. And with that done, if I go to subdivision surface mode, you see we have a nice button sticking out of that box, and that's a technique we're going to be using an awful lot over the rest of the model. So in a new mesh layer, we're going to start by creating this object here. Now, taking a look at our references, you can see that it's actually a cylinder, so you want to come up here to the Basic tab and draw out your cylinder shape. I'm just going to do this very roughly for the second to give you an idea. And then go to the front view and line it up. like so. And then when you're happy, space to drop the tool, and it's just a case of grabbing this top face and beveling it in to create this button object. So it's exactly like what we did on the other section of this mesh over here to create the button. You basically just kind of bevel this in, pull it down, in, and up to create the button object. Now the button actually doesn't poke above the shell, so I was going to drag this down a little bit. And then it's a case of just going in, getting rid of these n-gons, and then shoring up the edges with the loop slice tool. So I'm going to go away and do that, and then come back and show you what I've done. So this is what I've ended up with. It's pretty much similar to what we had before. I've gone in and added in these support edges running all the way around here and down the sides as well. I've also basically beveled in this top n-gon and then joined average to create this, and I've slightly raised up this middle vert just to give it a slight curve across the top of this button. Then down the bottom, I've beveled this in slightly and given us something which can connect down into the body of the camera. And this is just in case we have a look directly from this angle close up in a render. It's always good to just have these little bits. And to be honest, it's not a huge poly increase. So if you can add these sections in, it always adds a little tiny bit of realism to your model. So with this done, I've also gone ahead and added in this box in another layer. And this box basically covers this little bit that sticks out from this dial. And I've made it so it fits in both the top and the front references. So basically that is just what it looks like. It is just a box that I've rotated into shape. And from here we can start work on making it look like this. So I'm going to grab both of these edges and bevel them in, like so. Like that. I'm also going to then use the edge slice tool to create this into two quads. So we end up with a quad there and a quad there. And remember to do the same on the bottom. So I'm going to change that into two quads. And then going to use the loop slice tool with a count of 2 and mode of symmetry to shore up the edges. And then we can take a look in subdivision surface mode. Now things obviously aren't looking quite right, so I'm going to add an extra edge to the back here, but not to the front, so we want 1 and 3 in our loop slice tool. Move that to there quickly and take a look and see what we get, and we're getting there, but it's still not quite right. And the reason is we need an extra edge running around these top polygons. Now instead of coming in and adding it in manually or just beveling these polygons, what I decided to do was bevel down the back as well and join up with the bottom. And this gives us a single edge loop running all the way around this section of the model. So with these polygons selected, I want to bevel them in slightly. And now if I go to subdivision surface mode, you can see that things are looking a lot better. We still have one or two things to clear up, so I'm going to go to the top view. Now we need to add in something to support this edge, so with the slice tool I'm going to add an edge running across. With mode of automatic I'm going to select an edge running across there like that, which will make this a little bit better down here. Now we need to make it so it fits around this circular shape of the model. So what I'm going to do is add in an extra edge running down the middle, and that just gives us a little bit of extra things to play with. So I'm going to set the position on that guy to 50 to add in this extra edge. And then we want to kind of even out these verts down the bottom, because you can see in subdivision surface mode it doesn't look too bad at the moment, but for my liking I'd like this to be a little bit more evenly spaced down here. See, at the moment these two are close together, whereas these are now nice and even. So I'm going to do the same thing there, trying to maintain as much of a curve as we can. And you see we end up with a nice semicircle there. We then go ahead and move this roughly into position. And we'll do the same thing with this, and same thing with this. And then in subdivision surface mode, we can tweak these as much as required. So, that looks pretty good to me. Get a perspective and select the other mesh item as well to take a look. Now the final thing we need to do is basically add in a slight slope. Now where this reaches the body, it slopes up into this section of the model. So I'm going to add an extra edge running across there like that. I'm going to grab all of these verts at the top here, make sure you've got all of them, like that. And I'm just going to drag these down to this point of the model. Now if I go to subdivision surface mode, you'll see that we end up with this curve here, so we need to shore up this edge. So I'm going to double click that and bevel that, like so. And take a look at what we've got, and that looks a lot better. Now we're getting a little bit of a kind of smoothing issue down here, this kind of weird harsh line, and that's caused by this extra edge we added in. So I'm going to basically select it and hit backspace to delete it, and then add it back in to make sure that we maintain this nice slope running up here. Now with that done, That should disappear and everything should be nicely matching up. So that is that section of the model done. We're now going to take a look at this object here, which is the film speed knob. And if you take a look at the reference images, you should notice that apart from a few minor differences and a slightly bigger bottom, it is essentially the same thing as this guy over here. So what you need to do is just create a cylinder and bevel it and then add in some edges to shore it up into shape. And as luck would have it, ta-da! I have something over here. So if I go into subdivision surface mode, you see that we're getting a nice curve up here. I've done that by beveling this edge and slightly bringing this in. I've shored up some of the lower edges as well to give us this nice drop in, which you can see from the front reference image. And I've also added that bit going into the main camera body. Now at the top here, exactly like we did over here, I just took this face and beveled it in, then inset it slightly, and then build it back out to create this slight island in the middle. And I've just merged all those vertices down to one. Now the reason I didn't go into detail on this is because there is a much more interesting part over here. Now this is a button that sticks out the side of this cylindrical object, and if we go to the front view, you can kind of see where it sticks out. Now on this version of the model is actually in slightly the wrong place. It should start around about here and continue down to about here. So we're going to add that in to this model right now. Now the key to this was starting with the right amount of edges, and as you can see, this cylinder was created using 48 edges. And the reason for this is that we need to rotate this into position along the z-axis. Sorry, this should be the y-axis. There you go. My action center was slightly off. We need it so that we basically have two polygons covering this button. So I did some tests and found that 48 gave us a nice fit. So I'm just going to rotate it into position like that even, and come down into perspective view. Now it's always handy to kind of select some polygons so you know where you're at. But we want to take this button from here all the way down to somewhere around about there. So I'm going to come out of subdivision surface mode and make sure that we have all the edges in place. Now I've already put an extra edge in here which will mark the bottom of our button, so I think what I'm going to do is just come in and delete all of these polygons. Just get rid of them like that. Now if I go to subdivision surface mode, you can see that we have indeed created a hole, but we've got these curved edges instead of sharp ones, so we need to go and shore those up. However, we have a bit of a problem. If I was to go in and add an edge along the side like this, and this like we normally do, we're essentially adding extra vertices onto our cylinder and it slightly alters its shape. Now there are ways to get around that, and my favourite one is the one that I'll be showing you now. So, just like before, we need to add an extra edge above and below this new cut, and doing this does not affect the shape of the cylinder at all, so we can do this happily. So I'm going to add in an extra edge on both sides of the top and bottom of this hole, and keep checking the subdivision surface mode to see what we get. Now you can see we're getting these kind of nasty shading errors down there, and we're going to get rid of those as much as we can, but we might not be able to get rid of them entirely, although to be fair, on the actual model itself it is a little bit warped around this hole, so I think we can get away with it. Now likewise, we can't add extra edges down here like that because we alter the shape of the cylinder. So what I'm going to do is use the edge slice tool to just add in a try on that corner, and that gives us this vertice here but doesn't affect the overall flow of the cylinder. So I'm going to do this on all four of the corners like this, and now if I go to subdivision surface mode, you can see that we get much sharper corners. Now we're still getting a little bit of a smoothing error down there, but it's a lot less than it was a minute ago, so we'll see what happens as we move along. Now the next thing we need to do is add some thickness to this cut, so I'm going to grab these three edges, that guy, and that guy, and the same on the other side of the hole, so that guy, and that guy. And I'm going to use the edge extend tool to extend those up to that first edge, shift click and extend up again to that next edge, and then shift click up one final time to that top edge. And then we're just going to go in and use our keyboard shortcut to weld these vertices together. And when that's done, we'll check again in subdivision surface mode, and not much has changed, so we'll keep going and see what we can do. So I need to add in the top of this hole now, and quickly, a quick way to do that, sorry, would be to select these three guys and these three guys, and then we're just going to bridge these. Now obviously we need to move these into position, but I'm going to create the cuts before we do. So again with the loop slice, we're going to put that at 50. And remember we have these extra edges here as well. So I'm going to throw that guy to there and weld those two. And then add an extra edge down here as well. And weld these guys. And then I can select that entire loop and move it forward. Now because we rotated the cylinder, we're slightly off axis here, and I want to move this along the normal of this edge. So what I'm going to do is come up to Action Center and click Selection, and this will align our gimbal, or it should have done anyway. It didn't. Okay, so we're going to use another technique. Don't know why that didn't work, never mind. So Action Center, we're going to click Element. Now what this will do is it will align the gimbal along any edge or face or indeed vert that you right click. So with the things you want to move selected, I'm going to highlight over this middle edge and right click. And you'll see that our gimbal aligns along that edge. So we can then use this green handle to move that forward into position. Now remember to switch back to Action Center Automatic. And I'm going to select those guys and weld them together. And we can take a look at what we've got. So we're certainly getting there. I'm now going to double click this entire edge loop. I'm going to click Edge Extend and right click, and then I'm going to activate the Move tool. We want to move it again along that axis. So I'm going to come up and select Element again, and it should maintain our old selection, meaning we can just pull this back into the center of the cylinder. So I'm going to Edge Extend one more time, activate the Move tool again. We might need to right click on this edge, and then pull that back a little bit further into the center of the model. So space to drop the tool, back to automatic mode, and subdivision surface mode to see what we've got. Now you can see that things are looking pretty good. We've got a nice tight edge up there, but along this direction, this is curving into the model. And the reason for that is that we don't have any extra edges along this side to shore this edge into position. However, it's the same old problem. If we had an edge there, we're going to change the shape of the cylinder, so we can't do that. So what's the alternative? Well, what I ended up doing was selecting this entire loop, and then selecting all of these guys as well. In here, and down here as well. And I'm going to activate the bevel tool, and we're just going to bevel these in ever so slightly. And you want to watch these top corners to make sure they don't overlap. But bevel it in to about there. Space to drop the tool, and then go to subdivision surface mode. And you can see that we get a lot of a sharper edge there, a lot more kind of nice crisp edge. And in doing that bevel, we're not affecting the overall loop of the cylinder. We're not adding any extra edges to the main body of it, just to this whole section. So that is actually pretty good. Now, is it perfect? It's not. We've got some smoothing errors around the hole here, but to be fair, there are some errors slightly in the real life model as well, so I don't think people are going to notice too bad. So the next thing to do would just be add in the block for the button itself, and then this object will be done. So we can now start work on our film crank. So I'm going to come up to the cylinder tool, and I've already made a couple of settings in here with the size set to 24 and the radius of 9.45. I can click Apply, and it'll be roughly in position. Then I'm going to go to a front view, move it right up to the very top of the object. Back in the top view, I'm going to make two cuts just across the object, which will get us this middle section here. And once we've got that poly in place, there you go, I'm just going to hit Delete to get rid of it. Now with both of these, we're going to go to a front view and extrude them down to the very bottom of the model. Remember, we want to make it just at the top of that little island in there. So with that in place, I'm going to go back to perspective view. We're going to bevel the top of these polygons. So I'm going to grab this outer edge and this outer edge as well, and bevel with a round level of 0. So just a little bit, and that will give us a nice hard edge at the top of here. Now this edge and this edge of this object are both completely flat, so we need to move this and this in slightly. So with them both selected, I'm going to scale them in. In fact, I'm going to do this in a top view just to make sure we get it as close as we can. So I'm going to zoom in a little bit, and using Control, so holding down Control, I'm just going to use the slider value here, which will increase this and make sure that we can get that nice and flat. Now back in a left view, we need to shore up these flat edges. So I'm going to use the Slice tool to add in some extra cuts running down the side, like so. Go back to perspective and take a look at what we've got. Now obviously things aren't looking quite as expected, so we're going to add in some extra edges using the Loop Slice tool. This time with a count of 2 and in symmetry mode. I'm going to add in some edges there. Also going to add in some there and there as well, like so. Now with that done, back in symmetry mode, you can see we've got a couple of issues. This is looking a lot better, but this is too curvy round here and round here. And the reason for that is that there's no edge running around this top face. So what I'm going to do is select all of these edges running down the middle, including that bottom face. Do the same on the other side. I'm going to hit B for bevel, right click, and just bevel these in slightly. Now you might notice when we do this that we're going to have to do a little bit of cleanup because this edge has jumped out to the side slightly. So with them beveled in place, I'm going to go back to a left view and move these verts back into position. So do that one on that side, and then we'll do this one on this side, like so. Now what I'll probably do from here on in is just work on this side, and then we can do this side when we're finished. So back in subdivision surface mode, you can see things are looking a lot better. The one thing we have to do is make this hollow. Essentially there is a big gap running up the middle of this object. So what I'm going to do is select this guy and hit delete to get rid of them. I'm then going to select both of these bottom polygons, hit B for bevel and right click to create some new polygons, but then use the move tool to move them up into position. So initially I'm moving them up to this edge here. I'm then going to hit B again and right click to create some new polygons, and yet again move the move tool to get these right up to the top here. Now remember the bevel tool is also going to create some inside polygons that we need to delete, so I'm going to select those and get rid of them. And then we can go in and just merge some verts in here using our new tool. So where are we? Let's see. 2 verts there, and 2 verts just there as well. Remember to do the same on the other side, so come in over here. And I'm going to merge those two and merge the two at the bottom, like that. And before we go back to subdivision surface mode, I'm going to add an extra edge running around here. So with a count of 1 and in free mode, I'm just going to drag that edge up to the top. So back in subdivision surface mode, you can see that things are looking a lot better. Now we have this extra problem in here where this is smoothing around. However, no one is going to see in here, so we'll just be adding extra polys into our model if we went in and fixed that. So what I'm going to do is copy this over to the other side. So I'm going to select both of these guys and hit Control C, Control V. I'm then going to rotate them around 180 degrees, like so. And you'll notice that when we do, our rotation offset has gone a bit strange. It says we've rotated it 180 on X, 180 on Z, and nothing on Y. We know this not to be true. We know we want this to be 180 degrees on the Y only, so I'm going to manually change this to 180 and hit space to drop the tool. And then I'm going to go down and double click on these big blocks in the middle and then hit backspace to get rid of them. And we're left with the 2 shells that we need. The one final thing we need to do is add in this slight rim that runs around the outside. So I'm going to go out of subdivision surface mode and use the slice tool to add in an edge running down there. So I'm going to select that entire edge, go to perspective mode and bevel. We want to bevel with a round level of 1. Now I'm going to select both of these outer edges and bevel again, this time with a round level of 0, and that just adds an extra edge in there to shore it up. And then we need to select all of these outside edges. So I'm going to select a few and tap up to come around right to the end. Do the same thing over here. So just keep tapping up to come around to the end. With that done, I'm going to go to a top view and scale them up using the green circle. And this will create a nice ridge for us. Then we just need to grab these end vertices and scale them back down to make this and this completely flat. So with all those guys selected, I'm going to scale them on the Z-axis slightly, like so. And then back in subdivision surface mode, you can see we've created this nice ridge running around the outside. So in a new layer, I've created this layout here using the pen tool with quad mode turned on, and this just follows the basic shape of the film crank layer. Now I've made one side slightly longer. I'm going to go to the top view, bring up our film crank layer, and basically extrude this into place. So I'm going to grab all those polygons and extrude them across like that. Now I'm going to hide the film crank layer again. We need to add some edges to this to shore it up, because at the moment it doesn't look very good. So what I'm going to do is basically add in 2 edges running across using symmetry mode, like so. Now this side is going to be a curve, whereas this side over here we're going to have hard edges on these sections. So I'm going to add in some extra edges just over here like this, and some here as well. And what that'll do in subdivision surface mode is give us these hard edges, which in comparison with this side is completely different. It's a nice little bit of detail to add in. Now this edge here is a little bit too close to this one. Remember, we want equidistant spacing, so I'm going to bring this back a little bit, which should make this a little bit of a nicer curve. Now we need to add an edge at the bottom here, so instead of doing that, I'm just going to grab these guys and bevel them down once, which creates an edge running around it like that, which will make this nice and hard. And then what else are we going to do? Let's add one edge running around the outside. So I'm going to change our count to 1, our mode to 3. Now I'll kind of harden up that outside edge like that, and that looks pretty good. So I'm going to bring back our film crank and take a look at what we've got. Now underneath here we actually have a little cylindrical knob where you can kind of fold this out and rotate this round. So we're going to add that in, but I'm going to leave the rest of the detail under here up to you guys. So I'm going to go to a bottom view, and we want to be on the curved layer, which is this guy. So in our new layer, I'm going to go and get the cylinder tool and quickly drag out a cylinder like so. Size 24 is a little bit overkill. I'm going to take our size down to 8. And I'm going to pull that up into this and just drag it down like so. Now I'm going to hide our film crank layer. I'm going to double click this object in poly mode and click Shift H to hide everything else. I'll hide that top polygon and add some extra edges to shore this up. One there, and I'll bevel in this bottom face, which will give us this nice object there. Then if we click U to unhide everything, we have our little cylindrical knob in there. I can bring back our film crank layer, and that object is now completed. Now you may notice as well on the film crank layer, I also turned these n-gons into quads up here, and I did that simply by adding an extra edge running down there, and then connecting these up into these quad tris, and that's done on the top and the bottom faces in there. So moving on, we're going to go back and look at our viewfinder object. Now quickly before we move on to the viewfinder, I've just added in this PC socket, and I've done that off camera because it's just incredibly simple. We just got a cylinder, I've kind of beveled it in, scaled in some faces, and then added in some support edges, which gives us this nice looking object there. That's just on the very front of the camera that you can see just about there. Now I've also added in a top details group and put everything into there to clean up our item list. So I'm going to create a new mesh item, and I'm going to rename this to viewfinder. And I'm going to move that into the top details group as well. Now if we go to a back view, I'm going to hide our body sections and our lens mount and take a look at what we've got to build. Now you can see that it's basically a square, so I'm going to come up to the cube tool and draw a box to see what's going on with that. Then I'm going to flip it to face it towards us and go to a left view to move it into position. Now I'm going to move this back, so let's go to a right view instead, it's a little bit easier to see. I'm going to move it right back to about there, and then extrude it to create this back thickness. Now with that done, we need to create the next level. Now if I go to a right view again, you'll see that we've basically got 3 sections. We've got this one, then this dip, and then this outer screen. And this dip kind of goes in slightly, so what I'm going to do is go to a back view and make some cuts. And you can just see the bottom of it sticking out there. So I'm going to grab an edge and loop slice in symmetry mode to create those 2 edges like that. Then I'm going to add one edge just at the bottom like that. You can then grab this face, and in a right view I'm going to extrude it out. Oop, grab the wrong side, there you go. So right view, going to extrude this out to that level, and then we just need to tweak this bottom vertex up to match the reference like that. We can then grab this new face and extrude this out to the very end like that. Now we need to extrude out this and this as well to match our top reference. You can see these come out to the side. So with them both selected, I'm going to hit B for bevel and right click, and then I'm going to activate the scale tool and pull this out on the x-axis like that. With that done, now all we need to do is basically go in and shore up the edges. So using the symmetry mode and loop slice tool, I'm going to go in, add in some extra edges to make sure we keep this shape when we go to subdivision surface mode. So I'll go and do that now. So as you can see, I've gone ahead and added in the extra edges. Now I started off by beveling the front edges here so we get that nice curve going around here. And then on the edge of, either side of each edge, I've basically added an edge loop. So this is the same in all of these positions all the way around the model. The only difference is that I added in an extra edge loop to this section here, just to make sure we get a nice tight edge on this outer section. So when I go to subdivision surface mode, you can see that we maintain that nice shape in sub D. So things are looking good, so now we can go ahead and create the hole at the front. So I'm going to go out of subdivision surface mode, and I'm going to grab this poly here. I'm going to bevel this in slightly, and resize it. Then I'm going to bevel it in one more time, then bevel it back, and then bevel it back again and hit delete. And when we go to subdivision surface mode, this will become a kind of circular looking thing, which is not what we want. So we need to add in some extra edges to shore that up. So again, with symmetry mode and a count of 2, just going to add in some extra edges on either side, like that. And that should help with that. Now I might add one extra edge in the middle, just to ensure that we get a nice flat surface. And that is that viewfinder done. Now you can see we've still got these back polygons. So what I'm going to do is basically grab a couple of them. I'm going to grab, let's go out to here. So what I'm doing is selecting these polygons, making sure that I leave an extra row of polygons around it. So all the way around, like that. And when you're done, I'm going to bevel that in slightly, bevel it out slightly, and bevel it back, and then hit delete. And this will just be the bit that goes into the camera. And that is our viewfinder done. We can obviously go in and add in a flat plane now, which will represent the glass that you look through. So we're now going to take a look at this object, which is the shutter dial box. So in a new mesh layer, we want to get the pen tool and just start drawing out the shape. Now it's just a case of adding in the verts around the outside, and we want to use as few verts as we possibly can, while still maintaining the shape. And then basically it's just a case of going to subdivision surface mode and tweaking until we get the right kind of shape. Now at the moment you can see that this back edge is curving round, but don't worry too much about that for the minute. Just going to bring these guys out like so. Then out of subdivision surface mode, we can move it in the back view into position. So I'm going to grab it and move it down to here. You can just see in the background. And we want to move it down to the top of the camera, so I'm going to bring back our top section temporarily and just extrude this down like that. With the extrusion done, I'm going to delete our bottom face. I'm going to add in some edge loops running around the outside, like so. And I'm going to bevel in this top face as well. And when we bevel in this top face, we want to go to the back here and add in some extra edges, because at the moment this is going to curve right around. So I'm going to go to a top view. I'm going to slice all the way down there like that, which will add in one extra edge. And then I'm going to add in 2 edges at the back using symmetry mode, and this should keep this a nice and tight corner. Now while we're working down here, we may as well make this lean along here, so I'm going to go to a back view, select all of these verts and move them to the left slightly, and then going to drop the move tool and select our linear fall off, which is extremely useful, and then move them left, and this will match that nice curve for us at the back here. Now with that done, remember to turn off your fall off before you start working on anything else, and we can take a look at our object. So far things are looking pretty good. If I go to a front view, however, you can see that we've got this hole we need to cut in the object. So I'm going to go out of subdivision surface mode and take a look at how we might do that. So I'm going to start by slicing in an edge there, and I'm also going to slice in an edge there. But we want to make sure that we know what's going on with this edge at the back. See, we've sliced down there, and I don't think we want this guy, so I'm going to select those edges and this guy at the bottom as well, and hit backspace to get rid of it. And for now I'm actually going to get rid of this guy as well. We're just going to keep a big n-gon in the middle here. So with that done, we've now got some edges in place. We can go back to the front view and add an edge running along the top. So I'm going to change our count down to 1 and add that guy in, and then I can just grab these polygons and delete them. Now it's just a case of going in and shoring up these edges using the loop slice tool, which I'll do now and then come back. So as you can see, I've added in the extra edges we need to keep these corners nice and tight in subdivision surface mode. I've also gone ahead and filled in the top with quad polygons, and in doing so I've created this shape. Now this is the hole that we're going to create in the object running beneath this frame that we're going to add in next. And adding these squares on the corners makes sure that when we delete it and go to subdivision surface mode, it maintains that nice square shape. So with that done, we're now going to go ahead and add some thickness to this object. So I'm going to undo that delete and quickly, with these guys selected, bevel them in once, bevel them down once and down again, and then hit delete. We need to do the same thing to here. So I'm going to grab all of the edges on the outside of this hole, like so, not that guy. And I'm going to bevel these in once, shift click, and do it again. And then if I go to subdivision surface mode, you see we've got a nice hole there now. So with that done, we can now go ahead and add in our frame. So as you can see, I've created a small box on top of the shutter dial box, and this just follows the outline of this frame. I'm then going to grab all of the corner edges and bevel them with a round level of 1 to create that shape. And with that done, I'm going to grab this guy and bevel that in to make the inner frame. And then I'm going to shift click and drag it down. I want to go to the bottom of the frame and delete that bottom face as well before we do anything. Now we obviously want to show up some of these edges, so I'm going to grab this guy and do, just a count of 1 on that one, I think, for the minute. We'll do this one with a count of 2, and this one with a count of 2 as well. We want to remember to delete that inside face. So when we go to subdivision surface mode, you can see that things are looking okay, apart from these edges which are going a little bit too far into the middle. So I'm going to come out and add some extra edges here, equidistant around. We want to continue that on this side. So we now have these 4 polygons that are about the same size on each corner. I want to do that here as well. With that done, you can see that these things are looking a lot better now, a lot straighter here as well. So back to perspective mode. I'm going to come down to here. I'm going to add in an extra edge about halfway down, so about there. Now this frame actually extends out underneath this slightly. So I'm going to grab some polygons and we're just going to extrude them out to make them fit. So I'm going to grab these guys and these guys as well. I'm going to hit X for extrude and I'm just going to pull those out once. Then I'm going to shift click to reactivate and pull them out again and slam those down on the X-axis. Now remember, this is creating bottom faces as well, and we don't want those guys, so I'm going to delete all of them and hit backspace. And then we want to add in an extra edge right at the end there. And if we go to subdivision surface mode, you'll see that things are looking pretty good. The last thing we need to do is add an extra edge running either side of this. So I'm going to add 1 in just there and 1 in just there. And this will really shore up this edge for us and give us a nice hard crease running all the way around. So with that done, things are looking pretty good. I'll bring back our shutter dial box. In fact, I'm going to cut them both into the same layer. So you can see that that's done, and we can now move on to the next bit of detail. Now I've also gone ahead and quickly added in the self timer light, and this is because it's just basically another very simple object. You could either create a sphere and cut it in half and then extrude or extend the outer edge out, or you can do it like I did, which was to create a cylinder and then basically bevel that in and then up, and eventually you join the bits together, add in some support edges, and you end up with a nice looking object. So it's just a very simple thing that I didn't think we really needed to cover at this point. So we're now going to move on to the shutter button, which is this giant thing here. So I've gone ahead and created us a cylinder in the right place, and this is an 18-sided cylinder. And why 18 sides? Well, if I bring up the visibility options, show vertices, you can see that if I rotate this slightly, we get verts that line up very closely with this part of the button over here that we're going to have to create. So with these in place, I'm going to grab this top face and bevel it in, and I'm going to bevel in again, and then bevel in all the way to the center. Then with this in the center, I'm going to bevel one more time, then shift click, bevel in and pull down, shift click, pull down, and shift click, pull all the way down like that. And then when we're in there, I think maybe bevel one more time and then one final time, and we'll join these up with the joint averaged. So if I was to go to subdivision surface mode, we get a nice kind of flat bottom over there. It's not curving up the sides too much. Now with this in place, I'm going to grab this edge loop and I'm going to bevel that down once, a little tiny bit, and then again, and then one more time. And this creates this kind of island, this ring running around the center. Now obviously we need to shore up some of these edges a little bit. So I'm going to go here and with a count of 2 and a mode of symmetry, I'm going to add that guy in. Now I'm going to add one in here as well, and we can actually turn this down to 1 because I've already got an edge just there. I'm going to put that one there. And now if we go to subdivision surface mode, you can see we've created the top of that object. Now the bottom's obviously not looking too great right now, so I'm going to go to a front view and take a look at what we've got. Now I can see from here that we've got a cut running across the object, so I'm going to slice that into position. So we end up with this top dial and then this bottom section here running around it. And this bottom section is the bit that has the sticky outy buttons on it. So with this edge selected, I'm going to bevel it quickly. And I'm going to bevel it with a round level of 0, actually. Let's do it with 0. Then I'm going to select that loop again. I'm going to inset it once, and then I'm going to shift click and bevel it in a little bit, and then bevel it in again. We're going to bevel it in to about halfway down that set of polys. So with that done, I'm going to hit space to drop the tool and go into subdivision surface mode. And you can see we've created a nice gap there between the two sections. Now this bottom bit is not looking too healthy, so I'm going to go to a front view and get our reference back. And then I'm going to add in an extra edge just down the bottom there. Then I'm going to go to this bottom face. I'm going to bevel it in a little bit, bevel it in a bit more, and then pull it down a tiny bit, and then down into the body of the camera. And when that's done, you can hit delete to get rid of that polygon. And this creates the basis for this object. So going into perspective mode, these are the faces that we want to work on. Now the sticky outy button actually stops about halfway down, so I'm going to use loop slice to add in an extra edge. And then I'm going to go and select the polygons we want to bevel out. And with them all selected, I'm going to go back to a top view. I'm going to hit B for bevel and draw these out to about there. And with that done, I'm going to hit space to drop the tool and add in as many extra edges as we can to shore these up. So we want one there, one on the inside of there as well. Then we want one down at the bottom, and one on the other side of the extrude. Now the issue we have is that when we go into subdivision surface mode, we get this kind of thing going on, and it doesn't look very pretty. However, if we were to go in and add in an edge to shore this up, the edge would run all the way up and down into the center of the top part of this object as well, which would give us this nasty crease. So the first thing I'm going to do is basically separate these two parts. So I'm going to select some polys there and hit L to loop. And I'm going to hold Shift and click up on my keyboard to keep selecting and expanding our selection. We want to expand it down so that this inset is included. Then I'm going to hit cut, make a new mesh layer and paste that into there. So I'm going to go back to our shutter button and hide that new mesh layer for a moment. Then we can take a look at what we've got. So we need to add in some extra edges, so I'm going to start off by adding in some on the middle here, so on either side, like that, and see what that does. Now this gives us a nice hard corner there, but obviously things are not looking good down here because we've added in these vertices very close together. Same happens if we add them in on the other side. Obviously we're just adding more vertices, so strengthening that section of the corner. So we add in this point, which we don't want. So we need to redirect these edges somehow to get rid of that extra point. So with these there, I'm going to take a look around and see what we can do. I'm going to start by deleting the edges we definitely don't want. So I've selected these two, I'm going to delete them, and I can double click these edge loops and delete both of those as well. I'm going to do the same thing at the top. I'm going to select these guys and hit backspace to get rid of them. Now what I'm going to do is basically merge that vert and that vert together, and that vert and that vert. And what we've done is maintain our quad setup, but we've introduced these two tries that redirect this flow around the corner. And when you go to subdivision surface mode, it maintains this nice hard corner, but we still have a slight issue in that the vertices are not maintaining the circular shape of the object, so we're going to fix that in a second. So I'll do the same thing down here, so merge and then merge. And then we can go to a top view and turn on subdivision surface mode, And if we bring back the top of this object and put it in the background, you can use that as a template for where you need these verts to move to. So I'm going to push these back slightly, and you can see that I'm just trying to line this up with the background layer. So I'm going to move this slightly into position. Then maybe we'll grab these verts and move these up slightly as well. And you can see we're very close now to matching that top part of the object. So when you're happy with that, you can come down, and essentially it's just a case of grabbing things and tweaking them ever so slightly into position so you maintain a nice curve but get rid of any smoothing errors. And when you're happy, repeat it on the other side and this object will be done. Well, that's it for part 2, everybody, but leave me some comments below if you have any questions and I'll try and get back to you, and I'll see you all in part 3. Cheers, guys.